Indian Foreign Service officer of the 1987 batch, Sangeeta has in the last 25 years been posted in Spain, Bulgaria, Mexico and Belgium, having served in the Ministry of External Affairs and the ICCR. Presently Minister of Culture at the High Commission in UK and Director of the Nehru Centre in London. She's just launched her first book, Jaal, the first part of a trilogy. In Jaal, author Sangeeta Bahadur combines laws of matter, the Hindu story of creation, mythology, Vedic philosophy and metaphysics to weave the epic of Oshij, the lord of Maya, and Arhan, a young warrior with divine powers. May I request my colleague Modharima, please welcome Ms. Bahadur formally. And speaking to her this afternoon, Dr. Sangeeta Datta, Director, SD Films and Biotech UK, a non-profit art company based in London. She is a writer, filmmaker, film historian and cultural commentator, and also teaches an MA course in South Asian cinema at the Kolkata College. Dr. Datta has conducted several high-profile on-stage interviews in London and other venues with celebrities such as Sharmila Tagore, Shyam Benegal, Jaya Bachchan and Shabana Azmi, making her, I think, eminently suited for this afternoon's session. Modharima, could you please welcome Dr. Datta as well? And I think I'll get out of this stage right now and hand over to them to begin the afternoon's proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you for the introductions and thank you for being a co-organizer of this event. It's an absolute pleasure to be back in Calcutta and to be right in the middle of an interesting cultural event. And welcome to you, Sangeeta.
Thank you. And I must say that she's made a special effort to be here with us today because she actually preponed her departure from London just to make it here and to be here for this event. Thank you, Sangeeta.
It's my entirely. As it was when your book was launched at Westminster Abbey in the House of Lords, and it was a very interesting afternoon when you spoke about your book, when we got hold of the book physically and started reading it. And a lot of things today will come out of my sense of the book, but what I would like is to invite all of you to interrupt, to come in with your questions or reactions or responses at any point during the course of this conversation. Sangeeta, you've been in London now for a year, and the book was out this summer, but the gestation period was long. You've been with this book for
a long time.
For very long. And if you haven't read the book yet, and when you do, you realize why, because it is of epic proportions. It is just one part of a three-part vision, of a three-part structure. And so you begin to walk into this labyrinth and maze and very complicated, layered world in which there are several characters. And yet, of course, there is a central hero, just as would be in a sort of epic vision or epic structure. And I loved that. I loved the way one walks in through a lot of stories to actually then reach the hero. The hero is born much later. So leading up, there's a prologue, and although my mind goes back with my literature vision and my literature experience, I immediately think of the Odyssey, or I think of the Mahabharata. Closer to our times, I think it is Tolkien's mythology, or it is J.K. Rowling's mythology, which is so popular today, not just with young people, but with adults. And I imagine that this is the sort of world that Sangeeta is offering her readers, and there will be a lot of responses, a lot of exciting responses to this whole world. It's not just a character or a single plot. It is multi-layered. It is out of our understanding of time structure. Really, it takes us beyond. So, just to start, before we get into the book, what I'm interested in asking you is, as an IFS officer, how did you find time for creative writing? How did these two worlds come together?
I would say that being an IFS officer was something of a second choice for me, really, in many ways, maybe even a third. Because my first choice after writing was to become an air hostess, which never materialized because my parents put their foot down. So I actually went into IFS as a second option. And writing was something that I've been doing since I was maybe 13 or something, and wrote a lot of, at least a dozen novels while I was still in school and college. Never sent it for publication because, for one thing, in those days, Indians writing in English was not such a big deal. The people who were writing really boring stuff. I'm sure a lot of you would agree with that. So it never sort of occurred to me as a possibility that these are things that could be done. And then, much later in life, I was introduced to the fantasy genre. I really hadn't read much except for Tolkien's, as you say. But then I realized that so much exciting work was being done in that genre, but not in India, not at that time. So just as a kind of an experiment, I began writing this. And again, I was not really at all sure that I'd ever sent it for publication or whatever. But then as it started coming together, it was like, a whole new world coming into being, and it was sort of, you couldn't really, I couldn't predict the way it was going, but it was building up in a very, very interesting way. And it just seemed to flow. I don't know, it was like, as I think I mentioned in the House of Lords when I was talking also, it was literally like, frame by frame, it was like a movie. So it would just keep coming, and I kept writing, and then I sort of wrote about maybe the first 1/3 of the book. Then I didn't know whether I should go ahead with it or just abandon it. And then my husband, he read whatever I had written that far, and he said, "But this is so amazing. Why don't you just go and finish it?" So I said no, because there are always a lot of naysayers, as you think, because a lot of people told me, "Oh, but this is a genre that doesn't work in India. That's why none are being written." And it's beautiful, but nobody will be interested. So it was a lot of, and then at the same time they'd say it's very interesting, it's very well written, and so he said, just forget what people are saying, just go ahead and write, and let's give, unless you try, how do you know? And that is how. But it took me a very, very long time writing this book, because a lot of it was written between files, literally. I'd have 10 minutes, write a paragraph and everything. And then there would be these long stretches when I wouldn't write at all. I mean, sometimes the gap was as long as 8 months, 10 months, something like that, and then I'd pick it up. So overall, the writing itself would have taken me perhaps, 2 years off and on. But the whole period was around maybe 6 years or so.
But also when you started writing this, you've said it's taken a lot of time and it's been intermittent writing.
Yes.
But surely you had a sense of structure when you knew you were going to do a trilogy and this was going to be the first part of it, and you were introducing the hero and the anti-hero, so to speak. You must have had a sense of structure, of planning out before you started writing the fiction.
Actually, to tell you the truth, the first quarter of a book, or maybe even a third of the book, were written just because they flowed that way. But then at one stage I thought, okay, hang on, how long is this story going to be? Because I hadn't really started with the concept of writing a trilogy at all. I thought it would be over in one book. But then the way it was all building up, and there were so many things just flowing through me, and I knew that these are important issues, important aspects that I'd really like to explore in this book. So at some stage I decided, look, one book is probably not going to be enough, so let's do a trilogy. So once you take a decision like that, then you're right, you have to sit down and give it some kind of structure, because otherwise it just becomes too chaotic. Yeah. And so I think it was at that stage that I actually sat down and did a kind of a proper synopsis of the book and chapter-wise and all that. And I found that it helped. Still, even in spite of that, there were times when the book just took a turn and you couldn't stop it because that is the way things were flowing. So then you said, okay, you made a change to the synopsis itself. But ultimately, it does give a kind of a structure to the story, to the world that you are dealing with. And yeah, it helps. It helps. But again, as I said, I think every author will probably say the same thing, that you start off with a particular way of looking at that story. And sometimes it just surprises you, and things happen that, and especially because in this book there's so many stories flowing together. Yeah. So how they meld and merge, and then something totally unexpected sometimes emerges from that, and then you have to deal with that and carry on. So that is how I would say that it's part planned and part exploratory.
And as well as your hero, who is on this journey of the self, really, of finding the self. because whatever journeys are here, they're symbolic, they're metaphorical. At the end of it, here is like a young hero who has to know himself and to know his strengths from within. That's the interesting bit about Arihant. But there's also equally engaging the anti-hero, and I find that very interesting. And it is that way with most epics again, you know, whether you think of Ravana, or whether you think of Duryodhana, or you think of Satan in Milton's Lost Karna. Yeah, the anti-hero, the dark hero, also has to be extremely intriguing, has to be very sexy, has to be very, you know, attractive in that sense. And I think you've also brought that in, played with the gender of the anti-hero, so to speak. So, what is your response to that?
Sangeeta, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I have always felt that this is, you know, this is a rip-roaring adventure story also. If you've read it, you'll probably realize. But beneath it all, you know, there is this eternal quest to find out. And as you probably, you know, since you've read the book, you realize at various stages in the story, Arihant does ask himself, who am I? What am I? You know, why am I even? So that is definitely a quest for him, as it is for all of us. And but at the same time, what you mentioned about the anti-hero, there's not just one, there's several. And one is, you know, a god, and that sort of takes the whole story a cut above the usual, you know, good versus evil, because what I've tried to do is to, in some ways, play with the concept of an avatar that we have in our mythology. So, Arihant is born a human, but he has to sort of learn things about himself, about the world around him, and grow to a level where he achieves a kind of a status as an avatar, because he is the only one. The gods themselves cannot handle another god, because he's made of the same stuff that they are. And there's nothing that beyond a point they can do. The best, for example, the Oshich, who's the Lord of Maya and the anti-hero, the main one in this, the best that his siblings have been able to do is to imprison him in a prison of dreams, because they cannot destroy him, they cannot finish him. So they've turned his own Maya, you know, inside out, and used that to keep him in check for some time. For a very limited period of time, but they know that ultimately he'll break out of it, because, you know, he has the same powers, the same strengths that they do. So they need an element of surprise to sort of, you know, trap him in a way that he has not anticipated, not foreseen. So the humanity of Arihant is very much a part of you know, his aura. It has to be, otherwise there's no way he can actually even have a chance of a snowflake in hell, as they say, of defeating Oshich. So that is there, and Oshich himself, plus, you know, the other main anti-hero figure, we will not tell them right now, otherwise it spoils the surprise. Both of them have a very strong justification for being the way they are. It's not that they set out to be evil, it's just that they have a different worldview, and that is again something that I've taken from our own spiritual philosophy, because in the Indian philosophy, metaphysics, as you would know, there's nothing like the devil, right? It's they're just people who have those who go wrong, whether it's Ravan or it's you know, anybody else. It's essentially because they cannot perceive the truth. There is the curtain of Maya which separates them from the eternal truth. So they're not bad per se, it's just that they cannot see the truth, and therefore they just go wrong. So that is the kind of concept I've used. Therefore you'll find that, you know, especially in the next couple of books, when this whole world will flower out even more and come together, you'll see that all these people who are from a very superficial perspective, you might call them evil, but they're not, because they have a very strong point of view, they have a very strong reason for doing what they're doing, and to a large extent you can even find yourself sympathizing with that, because, you know, they just see the world differently, and you can't help that. So, you know, that's how.
Immortals of Meluha, that genre, in a sense, for lack of a better phrase, Amar Chitrakatha on steroids. And we're seeing slightly more serious work. We're seeing Vivek Debreu's 10-volume translation of the Mahabharata. So given that this is a kind of interest in retellings of the Indian mythology, the Indian stories of old, what's your take on this sudden profusion of this kind of writing today?
I feel that we are a nation of great storytellers. We have some of the most profound and most long-lasting epics, mythology that has ever existed in the world. So the interest has always been there. My feeling is that after independence, I don't know, this is not a politically correct thing to say, but I really feel that that generation of people, including my parents, for example, they were taught to think of the world in scientific terms, so it was like anything which is beyond what you can touch and feel and prove it doesn't exist. And because of that, the only kind of literature that was then being produced was essentially these socially relevant kind of stories and novels, etc. Fortunately, I think the Indian audience has now grown up, and they feel that just because you enjoy reading a particular kind of thing, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can take away only a fairy tale kind of a value from it. There's a lot of depth to mythology, to tales which deal with an alternative reality. And I think people are just beginning to, re-enjoy what they probably traditionally, because all of us, for example, as Sangeeta was saying, we've all grown up with stories from the epics, from the mythology, from Mahabharata, Ramayana, everywhere. And now suddenly you don't feel ashamed anymore. Yeah, let's put it that way, of saying that you enjoy Harry Potter, or you enjoy Tolkien, so you enjoy David Eddings, or any of Immortals of Miluha, or whatever. So it has sort of been a very liberating fact that now this particular generation doesn't have those hang-ups, those preconceived ideas about what is the right thing to read. So they are exploring the boundaries, they are expanding their tastes in literature. Whatever is interesting, whatever grabs their attention, they like it. So,
no, like you said earlier, there is a moral core to this that keeps it relevant even today. But I also think, and perhaps the question didn't come out very clearly, if you look back to that time post-independence that you're talking about, Indian writing in English then perhaps was characterized by an R.K. Narayan or
yes,
Rajananda,
exactly.
a particular style of stories.
Absolutely.
Today's Indian writing in English seems to be perhaps focusing more on this kind of genre. And could it be, one is of course this interest today in rediscovering aspects of the past that we might have missed out in the last 30, 40 years. But also I think perhaps today our buying power and therefore our ability to go for this kind of book is much more than in the 60s and 70s.
Of course.
I would have sold as well then.
Yeah, yeah. And the fact that not just a buying power, the fact that probably more people are educated, are literate, they're able to read. I mean, even though probably the percentage of literacy has not gone up very much, but the sheer number of people.
Accessibility is increasing.
Yes, and a lot of people are looking for good things to read, and if you offer them something which is interesting, attractive, they pick it up. So it's probably as you wanted to.
Yeah. The moment I received the invitation, I looked for you on the net as what you do. And the first thing that came to my mind was that, why is your hero a hero? And why isn't your protagonist a woman? Because you being a woman possibly will understand what a woman feels better, and this is what I presume, than a man. And why did you choose?
Well, that is a question that my daughter also asked me. She was very upset about that. She said, why must you have a man as a hero? But you see, one, because in the kind of, normally also in the world, probably a man is, if you place him in a situation like this, he has more of a freedom of movement. He can go to places, do things which maybe as a girl, she might not have been able to. And secondly, have you read the book? You haven't. Okay. So I'm letting out a little secret, but one of the main anti-heroes of the book is a woman. So, rather than just trying to explore the positive side of a woman's nature, and there are very strong women characters in this. The anti-hero is of course there, and there is a character called the Vakrini who's been alive for 6,000 years and lives in a mind city that she herself has created. And she is again a very, very powerful figure. So the way I see this is that while Arihant is just one, and we are trying to explore him at various levels, the essential femininity, and aspects of it, I have explored it through various female characters who are all very strong, very, very strongly etched I would say, and they all have, some are positive, some are negative, some are neutral, but they are all the kind of people who leave a massive impact on the reader. So perhaps rather than focusing on just one character, and why didn't I make my hero a woman, which I could have done, because it's only a matter of chance that it's this person who is chosen to be the hero. It could well have been a woman, but that was the reason, because I really want to explore the concept of being a woman in different ways, from different angles.
I haven't yet read your book, but
I hope you will.
I'm very much eager to do so after your discussion. I was fascinated by your description of the anti-hero as not necessarily being evil, but having more of a different worldview. That sounded, I wonder if you could elaborate, because my understanding was more that the anti-hero more represented the egotistic, self-interested character rather than having an alternative worldview. But it seemed you were describing it slightly differently.
No, in fact I agree with you entirely, because why would a person have a different worldview? Essentially I would think because the way he perceives the world is done in a way which is very particular to him, right, or to her. So unless your ego itself is twisted, unless your own sense of self is twisted, you would not perceive the world in a totally different or a totally flip kind of a way. So definitely the anti-hero in this book, the anti-heroes I should say, all of them have a different worldview, essentially because they themselves are different. But by saying that, I'm not saying that they are evil. There are ways of looking at the world. Arihant, who's the hero himself, he has a particular way of looking at the world because he's constructed in a particular way. He's repeatedly referred to in the book as the divine instrument, the divine weapon. So his consciousness has been framed by the cosmos, by the universe, in a particular way. And he responds to situations in a particular way. Because his task is clear. He's been given this one task of destroying the god, who is indestructible otherwise. So he has to think in a particular way. He cannot be allowed to slip into, he cannot be allowed to be selfish, for example. He has to be, there to take on this absolutely impossible challenge. But the others, the god Oshij, who's the anti-hero himself, he has this feeling that he has been sort of shortchanged by his siblings, by the other gods. Because the concept with which I'm working is that there are these four deities, main deities, who have been given the task of constructing the world, protecting it, creating the life forms that inhabit it, and he has been given the task of maintaining the curtain of illusion, the Maya. And each yugal, each eon, let's say, of time, has one presiding deity. So one of the four becomes. So he feels that when it was his turn to do that, his brothers and sisters stood a party. He's the innocent party who's been deprived of his rightful, expression, so to say. So that is how. So there's no contradiction between what you're saying and what I'm saying. It's sort of gels together.
Okay, so now you have revealed in front of you another facet of Sangeeta Bahadur. She's also a very talented singer. And so
she's saying that in faith. She hasn't heard her sing.
With a name like that, you and I can't sing badly.
Okay, so that gives me a secret about her.
Yeah, she's a very good singer.
Is she?
I
know her
she
son.
has sung.
Really?
Yes.
Which one? This the Life is Beautiful.
Life is on.
Life goes on. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Okay. So you've sung. Oh, okay.
And English from English.
Really? Okay.
No, Hindi.
Hindi.
Sorry.
Okay. Well, I knew that his son is a very well-known sarod player. I didn't know that Sangeeta sang herself. But now we'll have you at the name set.
Now we have you. So let's hear.
Okay. I must tell you that I'm not a trained singer. I'm a very eclectic one, so I sing everything I can sort of lay my hands on. So this is something that I always find it very inspiring. It's a very, I guess, a very feminist, a very individualistic song. But in moments when I'm sure a lot of you have heard it probably, but when you feel really down and out, and there was a time when I was, as I said, so this really, helped me feel better at, certain points of my life. So I'll just sing a little bit of that for you. मैं कौन हूँ, क्या हूँ, जाना मुझे है कहाँ, ऐ ज़मीं, आसमां, ऐ हवा, तू बता कौन हूँ मैं, क्या हूँ मैं, कहाँ मुझे है जाना, मैं कौन हूँ, क्या हूँ, जाना मुझे है कहाँ, ऐ ज़मीं, आसमां, ऐ हवा, तू बता कौन हूँ मैं, क्या हूँ मैं, कहाँ मुझे है जाना. Sangeeta Datta has one. Thank you, Sangeeta. Yeah, I know.